Prophet of Time by Joyce Lee. Chapter 2. Noah lounged at a corner table of the Raven's Nest and absently ran a finger over the rim of his empty mug. As the anonymous proprietor of the establishment, he was careful to feign a bored expression as he waited for his contact to appear, or his shift at the bar, whichever came first. Today's server and guard on duty, Travis, weaved his way through the dozen lacquered round rosewood tables, setting down platters of fresh bread and succulent spiced lamb at tables for the guests who came for something more than a rendezvous or conversations with shabby rumor mongers. Noah had been told he should be proud to have accomplished so much over the years. In part he was, but he still hadn't fulfilled his ultimate mission to destroy the men of the priesthood and their cult of worship to the death god, Zarin. 5 years had passed since he'd failed to save his older sister Julia from her induction into the Temple of Death. According to his sources, their willingness to become a priestess of death only saved them from being magically compelled to take on their inevitable role. The creak of the tavern door announced the arrival of a new customer, and Noah made his way to the bar just in time to intercept the man. He spared Dawn, the barmaid, a small smile and nod of thanks before ordering 2 fresh mugs of ale. Noah turned his attention to his contact. The man's face was obscured by his dark hooded robes. With a hunched back and a pair of gnarled white hands, the man's overall build reminded Noah of a short, wizened grandfather. Since they were merely acting as servants to different masters, they had settled on cool aloofness during their verbal bouts.
Well met, Spider.
It was the only alias the old man had ever given him.
Hello, messenger,
the man said with a nod. He drew out a folded piece of parchment from his sleeve and slid it over the smooth tabletop to Noah. Noah took the missive and read the carefully crafted penmanship before folding it up again.
Follow me.
They took their drinks and went through a curtain opposite the kitchen to the hall of private meeting rooms. 2 bodyguards stood in front of each occupied door, but their faces were cast in shadow by the hall's dim lantern light. They were ignored as Noah led them to the last door on the left, which was always left free for managers, and therefore had a lock. He lit a lamp, revealing 2 chairs and a rustic square table in the otherwise sparsely furnished room before the old man shut and locked the door behind them. Noah took a deep breath as they set down their mugs on the table.
Enough of this. Who is this from?
The show of impatience was rare as Noah tossed the note on the table and read aloud.
We shall make what we have work to our advantage. Join forces with me, and we can win this together.
He let out a scoffing laugh before he took the seat opposite his acquaintance.
This isn't about winning some game. It's about saving lives, and how can we do that without soldiers? Weapons. The gods know they won't fall from the sky and into our laps.
The old man straightened and lowered his hood, revealing lines carved deep into his skin. He was pale and appeared fragile. A sparse tuft of white hair whispered like cobwebs across his scalp. His sharp eyes, a dark brown that seemed to look through one's body and into the soul, always gave Noah chills.
Patience is a virtue. We have no need for such resources until we have a plan. I take it that you don't have one despite your ties to the Guild of Life and this unsanctioned spy branch you've created.
The old man took a sip from his mug, which only drew attention to his smug smile. Noah leaned forward in his seat.
My master does have ideas, but we need supplies to rid this earth of the priesthood just as much as we need soldiers. The guild members can be discreet, but they are not fighters. They certainly don't have funds. Funds I expected from your side.
Brute strength can only go so far. Even the most insignificant pawn can capture a queen. All it takes is a little strategy. Besides, we do have something to contribute to our mutual goals.
The man spread his hands out and gave Noah a fox-like grin.
It's time for the masters to meet and discuss their plans. We will all reach an agreement eventually. I await your answer at the baker's shop tomorrow morning so we can schedule an appointment for the end of the week.
And how do I know this isn't just another ploy of the priesthood to take us?
I don't trust you with my master's safety either, but I have delivered the request all the same. It's your move now.
Forgive me if trust is hard to come by. Betrayal in this city is often so stifling I can hardly breathe.
Sarcasm dripped from Noah's tone. A slow smile spread on the old man's face.
We are too much alike, you and I. Nevertheless, I have done my part. Do what you will with the information.
Noah's mind raced as he stared at the messenger. If he had a meeting that required a master present, he would usually ask Dawn's father, Andrew, to play the role. But the priesthood had taken him. Andrew's status was still unknown, but Noah didn't hold much hope in seeing him again. He squared his shoulders and spoke with false bravado.
I will consult my master.
Good. I'll see you on the morrow.
Noah nodded and gave the man time to finish his ale and don his disguise before escorting him out of the tavern. Noah took a seat at the bar and passed the empty mug to Dawn. He finally started to nurse his drink as he contemplated his dilemma.
Is there anything I can do for you, Noah?
Dawn asked as she tossed the used vessel in with the others. Noah allowed a sigh to escape his lips as he pushed a stubborn lock of hair from his face.
I need you to find somebody to play master, preferably somebody in the guild who can't talk. Pierre, perhaps.
I'll get in contact with him.
He looked up to see the faraway look in Dawn's eyes as her brows knitted together in distress. Noah had seen it often enough to know that she was thinking of troubling subjects, such as her father's whereabouts or the safety of her fellow guild members. She bit her bottom lip, and Noah knew the subject of her thoughts. Before Noah could call Dawn back from her guilt, Travis approached with dirty platters and utensils clattering with each step. Dawn blinked as Noah raised the bar flap to let Travis through before he took his place at the other side of the bar.
It's time for my shift. Get some sleep, Dawn. I'm sure you're exhausted.
They exchanged grateful smiles before he bent down to retrieve an apron from the bottom shelf. She had hidden her guilt so well over the years, he thought she no longer blamed herself for the event that had set all this in motion.
Thank you, Noah, for everything.
He felt her arms encircle his neck as he straightened and was surprised when her lips met his. Noah stared at her as she backed away, a blush blooming on her cheeks, almost matching the color of her hair. She glanced back at him from the corner of her eye, and her face fell. Noah ran a hand through his messy brown hair and avoided her piercing gray eyes. The almost imperceptible sound of gathered fabric made him look at her. He saw her turn and scramble toward the exit, leaving curious spectators' gazes to linger on the door before turning to him. As if the day couldn't get any worse.
Leanne didn't risk being turned away by knocking on her father's study door. She barged in like a barbarian and held her head high with the regality of a queen in spite of the handful of documents she carried. Her footsteps were short and crisp on the white marble floor. Intricate Corinthian columns stood tall, supporting the vaulted ceiling and stained glass windows above. Brilliant golds, violets, and emeralds brought beauty to a place and a position she'd lost faith in years ago. This was her father's last chance to act like he gave a damn about his people before she set her plans in motion. She dropped the pile of documents on King Gerson's desk.
"What are these?"
The king asked, eyeing the papers.
These, Father, are the documented sacrificial rituals, kidnappings, and assassinations that have occurred over the last 2 months.
Leanne's tone was sure and clipped as she put a gloved hand on her hip. Her sky-blue eyes held a calmness she did not feel. There was a pause as the king looked from his daughter's face to the papers, and then back to her.
"I see that you have been digging through dismissed cases, Leanne. I will not waste more time looking through reports of people foolish enough to self-mutilate, run away from their homes, or have accidents."
Leanne shook her head.
If that is truly what you think these are, then the 6 guards who disappeared 2 years ago must still be wandering the world, not dead.
Liam, who sat at his father's side, spoke up.
"Do not make light of the past. Those were good guards, and we were sorry to lose them to their unfortunate end. Now, if these crimes are being committed, what do you think we should do about it, sister?"
Leanne bit the inside of her cheek and resisted the urge to shiver at the prince's dark drawl. He rested a muscular arm on the desk and looked up at her with contempt. Golden blonde hair graced his hard but handsome features, and his jaw was unadorned courtesy of his usual morning shave.
Go to the source. You know who is behind all of this just as well as I do. The men of the priesthood and the ones they serve must be brought to justice.
Leanne waited for the king to look through the documents to see her point, but his eyes didn't waver from hers.
I will not oppose the gods. The priestesses of death serve the death god, and the priesthood serves the priestesses.
The words spilled out as if it was his mantra, and his azure eyes sparked with annoyance at the need to repeat himself. Leanne wasn't sure why her father was so adamant about giving the priesthood power. Perhaps it had been his premature thrust into leadership that made him so resigned to keep things as they were. Rumors regarding her grandfather and his death revolved around the notorious organization.
The gods do not rule over our people any longer. They have not for thousands of years. You rule them, Father, and if you are not willing to stand firm with me, I will deal with the problem on my own.
How will you do such a thing? Outside of the palace, you are naught but a pretty princess. You have no right, no command, and nobody will aid you.
Leanne flashed a humorless smile.
The laws of Cyrilia might not grant me charge of an army so long as there is a crown prince, but I will earn one. You can do nothing to stop me.
You planned treason, Leanne. It's bad enough that you've torn apart our family with Mother's death. Now you seek to overthrow the rightful king.
Liam shot up and banged his fist on the table.
I will not allow it.
Leanne sighed and crossed her arms. This stranger wasn't the same brother that used to bring back treats when he'd snuck away from classes to visit the city. This wasn't the same silly boy who tried to get her to break her carefully crafted composure during court. This man had nothing but misplaced anger, hatred, and suspicion in his soul, but there were times she could see a spark of familiarity and compassion. Leanne could only be so lucky as to get through to that part, and even if she could, she would never reveal the truth behind their mother's demise.
I love you, Liam. Truly I do. Can you not put aside your hatred for me and do what you can for the people we care so much about? Father, can you not see the harm they are doing? The priesthood plans to take over our beloved country. Cyrilia is ours to protect, and I will do just that.
Gerson finally placed his letter aside to skim through Leanne's documents.
The priesthood plans to take over. I see no such evidence that they seek political gain. Only a few priests and priestesses from different orders have been assassinated, and aren't all religious figures targets?
They are weakening the other influential factions. It is only a matter of time before they attack more important government officials, including us.
Leanne jabbed a finger at one of the reports. Frustration at her father and brother seized her, and she gave in to her anger.
You failed to mention this one. Earl Evan was in charge of a small piece of land in the north before being assassinated. Of course, their first steps would be targeting those with little power and protection to sow fear and chaos.
Nonsense, Leanne. I have humoured your ideas long enough. You will cease these absurd accusations and focus on finding yourself an eligible husband. If there is some conspiracy, a strong alliance will help us defeat it.
Leanne couldn't allow fury to consume her wits. She glared at her father before glancing back at her older brother. Then she turned and walked away from the family from which she was born. Clive was sitting on a bench in the garden with a book in hand when Leanne arrived. Her mother's only remaining spy had served Leanne well over the last few months by exploring the Guild of Life. His old wizened features seemed to be focused on his book, but Leanne wasn't fooled. He knew everybody and cataloged the comings and goings of the network of spies that had been hastily crafted over the past 3 years. The spy had been waiting for a hand to wield his knowledge against the priesthood. All the while, he acted as a simple servant who was currently taking a break in the bright, cheerful afternoon.
What do you have to report?
Leanne plucked a fallen apple leaf from her head. She spoke in Clive's native Hukandan dialect, so as not to be understood by passing servants. The floral scent of roses and lilies was heavy in the air. A blue and black butterfly floated by, contrasting with the greens, pinks, reds, and purples of the plants around them. Clive looked up from his book and replied in the same language.
He has no other choice but to meet with you, Highness. Let's see what fool Master Noah will bring to this encounter.
Leanne laughed as she sat by his side.
I hope he arrives alone so I don't need to pretend.
Why this pretense? I've hinted to him that we know of his role as spy master.
Clive closed his book and set it on the bench.
If he's adamant about keeping his facade, who am I to disappoint him?
Games upon games. Both of you are keen on playing them, and yet he's the one who complains about it.
You think he's a hypocrite? Ah, well, it doesn't matter. What is life, if not a game? Each move, every manipulation, even a single word can lead one down a path of destruction or salvation.
Leanne took a knife out from the folds of her dress and trimmed a pink-tipped white rose from a nearby bush. She studied the bloom carefully and got rid of the thorns and the majority of the bottom leaves. There was potential in the cutting. It just needed to be nurtured if she wanted it to grow for her. Clive shook his head.
Speaking of moves, might I advise you not to go into town too often, Highness?
She raised a brow as she stared at her servant.
You don't have the right to dictate my movements.
You are the future of Cerelia. If you must, take somebody with you. We both trust Violet and her guards. Perhaps you should suggest an outing.
Leanne sighed.
It shows how far Cerelia has fallen that their princess cannot traverse her own city without loyal guards.
Clive didn't disagree. Instead, they planned in hushed tones. Leanne needed to be ready for the meeting, and this time she would get the support she required.